So, why 11/22/63? Because it's a really good book for starters. It's one of my favorite novels by one of my favorite writers. I think just on its own as a novel, it's a masterpiece. It's very well written. It's meticulously researched in its historical accuracy. Its speculation as to the events that it talks about is very within the reasonable bounds of plausibility. It's a moving character study. It's an interesting conceptual piece. It's an interesting time period piece. And not only that, it crams all of human experience into one story: pain, joy, suffering, loss, grief, mourning, love, happiness, fear. Everything's in this book, and that's the thing. And it's also several stories within the one main arcing story. And for those of you who don't know, 11/22/63 is a story by Stephen King, about a guy named Jake Epping. He's a English teacher in the present day. He discovers that his friend who runs a diner has a portal back in time, in the back where the pantry is. This portal leads to 1958, and if you go through it, you always come out at the same day, at the same time, and the same hour. Jake initially doesn't only test it out a little bit, but then he gets an idea. He gets an idea to go back in time to stop the brutal murder of a family of a student of his GED program in the town of Derry, Maine, and he successfully does it. This gives him, coupled with another idea that the friend of his diner owner friend has, to stop the Kennedy assassination. Jake goes through with this, and in doing so takes on a completely new identity. So he goes to 1958 with this new identity of George Ambrose, and decides to slip into the times in the life and society at that point and wait it out. And in the meanwhile, he's getting ready. He starts. He goes to Dallas. He commutes from Dallas to this small town in Texas. Gets some mid-century bugging equipment, bugs Lee Harvey Oswald's apartment, and starts watching the dude. He will drive all the way from the town he's living in, where he's living a life as a teacher and everything, trying to be a normal, ordinary Joe, all the way to Dallas to watch Lee Harvey Oswald, and so he can intercept him at the Kennedy assassination. Meanwhile, there's a lot of other things going on. You find out Jake is divorced. You find out that he doesn't feel much emotion, which is a narrative arc throughout the story. You find out about his bad relationships with his wife. He starts a new relationship with a school teacher in 1958 Texas. It becomes the love of his life, who he comes to deeply care about, and it causes Jake to grow as a character. These whole series of events causes him to grow as a character, and it's very well done and doesn't feel forced. Meanwhile, there's a lot of details in this. Obviously, it's a huge-ass book, but there's a lot of details going on. It talks about his experience with some of his students. It talks about some people that he meets in the past, and kind of how they influence things. It talks about, a tragic, event of a high school kid dying and the ramifications it has on the high school in the 50s. Also, it's packed with King's impeccable eye for little details, his little subtle details that he sprinkles in all of his stuff, which especially come through in his longer works, of little things that highlight a time or a place. Little things he talks about how at one point he's there's a restaurant or a bar or something, I can't remember exactly, and along the counter they're there's a product placement ashtrays for Winston, and he goes so far as to point out how they say they taste good, like the product says, Winston tastes good. Like little things like that pepper his writing with not an abundance of details, but little details enough to make a story more fleshed out and more believable. And King does it really, really well, and that's why he's one of my favorite writers. There's so much to talk about with this novel. Like, just another thing I want to talk about is how well it encapsulates the time period he's talking about. Late 50s, early 60s, you know, the kind of the stereotypical view of sock hops and malt shops and, you know, Elvis and Ike and all that jazz, you know. But he goes past that and talks about the story as if it's a real time and place, not a paper-thin facade for an era. That's what he does. He goes past the cliches and gets to what is real about America at that time, and actually explaining it and talking about it like it's a real place instead of just treating it such. And he does all this through the first-person perspective of the narrator, Jake. You know, Jake describes these things not as a... Well, at first, as kind of a sci-fi tourist, like, what the fuck? Like, this is weird, I'm in another time and place. But the more he's there, the more it just comes down to just straight narrative. And just kind of how it feels like anyone describing a time and place. Because he transcends these cliches to talk about how things really were, and how things weren't as cliched as we like to think when we talk about that era. And that's something I really like about the book. In addition to all its other great attributes. It's great writing, it's interesting story. King did exhaustive research, which shows in the story. It's just a very good novel from start to finish. And I would actually put it in like my top 10 favorite Stephen King novels, which would put it in about the top 10 of like my favorite of just about anybody. So I've read it 3 times, and I never get tired of it. That's the thing. Like, I usually don't read a book more than once, unless it's a book I just love. And with the exception of certain writers like Haruki Murakami and J.K. Rowling, I don't typically read their work more than one time. But King has done that. There's very few King novels even, and he's one of my favorite writers that I've read more than once, and this is definitely one. And definitely worth reading. So I highly encourage you guys to check out 11/22/63. I think anyone who reads it will kind of get engrossed in it, and definitely get sucked into it, because there's a lot going on in it, and it doesn't feel boring. It's really long, but despite its length, it's engrossing. It doesn't feel like, oh my god, this is going on forever. It feels like what's going to happen next, and it's full of like twists and turns and all kinds of things that come up. There's like tons of things not even in the JFK assassination thwarting plot going on. There's a lot of other things that come up in side plots and things that are just as compelling, and which take the stories in a really unexpected turns at points. So definitely check out 11/22/63. Also, just check out anything if you haven't read Stephen King in general, just check out King. He's written so many good things. Off the top of my head, this is going to be this part of the video is going to be a first timer King recommendation list. Okay, It, The Stand, Christine, Dolores Claiborne, Gerald's Game, and the Tommyknockers I think are the best ones to start with. But yeah, check out Stephen King if you haven't. Especially those books. I think those are good introductions to his work. So that's it for now. I will be up with another video soon. I don't know when, but hopefully it'll be within a day or so. I had a little more free time lately, so I'm trying to post a little more regularly. We'll see how that goes. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me to ramble on about one of my favorite novels by one of my favorite writers. There's so much more that I didn't even get the chance to talk about here. But I kind of feel like that leaves more for you guys to explore and find out on your own. So that's kind of cool. So I just wanted to highlight it and talk a little bit about why I like it. So I hopefully will be back soon. So until then, I will see you guys later. Take care.